Hi, I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd, coming to you live from my backyard in Los Angeles, California, where it is yet again another toasty, warm day, so I'm going to stay in the shade and be a little bit cooler. How is everyone doing today? I hope you're well, I hope you're happy, healthy, and having some fun. Today we're going to continue our exploration of the ocean by talking about yet another amazing creature that lives in the ocean as we celebrate Ocean Day all week long. Today on Critter Chat we are talking about seahorses. Seahorses are an incredible animal. There's several different species. There's actually between 46 and 47 species depending on who you ask, with more species being tested and discussed all the time. Scientific community has gone back and forth about how many species there are several times with seahorses for a variety of reasons, some of which we'll talk about today. But for starters, seahorses are fish, okay? They are fish. They are a type of fish. They don't look very much like other fish. They certainly are a different shape than other fish. But they do have some of the very same similarities that most fish have. They live in water. They get their oxygen through gills from the water. And that most importantly, this is what really makes them a fish, is that they have a swim bladder. A swim bladder is a special organ that fish have that help them to control their buoyancy or their ability to float in the water. With seahorses, they can really control that very well and help them go up or down. Most fish can't control it quite that well, but it's very important to keep a fish from sinking to the bottom or floating to the top. Sometimes there are fish out there and other sea animals that have problems with their buoyancy, and sometimes medical teams can intervene and help fix those problems, especially like vets at an aquarium or something that understand how to safely navigate that. What seahorses don't have that most fish have are scales. So most fish are covered throughout their bodies in scales. Seahorses do not have that. They actually have more of a true skin, similar to like what we have. And it is pretty thin, and it covers bony plates that are kind of on the outside of most of the rest of their body, which makes them a little unique, a little interesting. And seahorses and their cousins all kind of share that trait. Their skin is very special, though. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The way they got to be named seahorses is the shape of their head is somewhat similar to the shape of a horse's head. And so people who first discovered them thought that they looked like little horses that lived in the sea. Now, if you imagine a seahorse, they're usually kind of a very vertical animal, very up and down. If you imagine them on their side, if you lay them on their belly, the shape of a seahorse is really not too different than some fish. They're kind of elongated. They have little fins that help them move. They have a tail at the back, a head at the front. They don't really have arms or legs. They have kind of a little fin on the top or on their backbone. So they do kind of resemble some fish in some ways. You just need to kind of evaluate how you're looking at it. With seahorses, their fins are very, very weak and very little. Most of their movement is provided by their fin along their back that goes kind of from their head down almost to their tail, and it wiggles very quickly. They can move it about 50 times a second, but it's not very big and it's very thin. So that gives them some mobility, but it's not very good. They also have two little fins kind of right here behind their head, and those kind of help regulate them so they don't tip over one way or the other. And so the fin on the back helps them move forward. The fins on the side kind of help make sure they don't tip over. And their fins, although they're pretty weak, that is how they move. They don't move very far, which is okay for them. What is very important about their anatomy or their body that helps them to kind of live their life is their incredible tail. Their tail has the ability to really wrap itself around and grab hold of things. Kind of like a tail on some of the monkeys that we've talked about, a prehensile tail. A tail with the ability to grasp hold of things. So with seahorses, they use their very big, strong tail to anchor them so that they don't drift away in ocean currents. Seahorses live in shallow coastal areas where there's a lot of vegetation, typically along things like eelgrass or seagrass, different kinds of seaweed, sometimes in coral reefs, but they don't live in open water. They need, one, something to anchor them so they don't get pushed around too much by the current, and two, they like to blend in and kind of hide. That's very important to them because they are a predator. I know we think that they're so cute and adorable, but if you look closely at the video I posted earlier on Instagram and Facebook, those are seahorses eating. And if you look, they are very good at doing that. They're incredible predators with about a 90% success rate as far as how many animals they try to eat and how many they actually eat. It's 90%, which is remarkable. Most big predators that we think of, like lions or tigers, their success rate is usually like 30 to 40%. So seahorses are excellent predators, and they do a very good job at helping control populations of little tiny things that they eat. They are an ambush predator. That means they're not going to try to chase it down. They're not like the cheetah of the sea. They're more like the jaguar of the sea. So they like to hide and kind of wait for the prey to come near them, and then they strike very quickly and get their food. Sounds like another animal we talked about in Critter Chat not that long ago, the chameleon type of lizard. If you missed that, go back and listen to or watch the chameleon episode of Critter Chat. Like a chameleon, seahorses can also do a couple different things. One, chameleons can move their eyes independently of each other, and that helps them to focus on prey, and they can actually look in front and behind them at the same time, which is really important when they're looking for itty-bitty things to eat. Also, like a chameleon, they can change their color. Seahorses, that thin layer of skin that's over their bony plates has chromatophores in it. That's a very special word that means skin changing color. And they can kind of blend in with their surroundings. And they can do that to communicate emotion with other seahorses and also to camouflage. So very similar to our friends, the chameleons. What else? Oh, they also often have little spines or little bumps or things that kind of help them blend into the seaweed. So they almost look like a little plant. If you've ever been to an aquarium that has seahorses, it might take you a minute to find them, especially if they're in a very deluxe environment with lots of plants and rocks and coral and stuff. They can hide and blend in pretty well. Like I said, that's because they are an ambush predator. They try to blend in so that they can find their food. So the food that seahorses eat are little tiny things. Typically a little type of shrimp, or also little tiny fish and things called plankton. We talk about plankton from time to time on Critter Chat. Plankton are the smallest animals and plants that live in the ocean, and they're a very important part of the food chain or the food web of many animals who live in the ocean, including things like jellies. Jellies are also big plankton eaters. Seahorses eat small things because they have a very small mouth. Their mouth is kind of on a tube-like snout, and with that mouth they kind of suck really quickly, and it sucks the prey into their mouth. They don't have teeth, so they don't chew their mouth. In fact, their stomach doesn't even really exist. They have a very simple and quick digestive system. So that means that they suck things in, their body kind of dissolves it, digests the nutrients that they have, and they poop it back out. With that means that they have to eat a lot of things. They eat about 1/4 of their body weight every day. And so they're kind of constantly hunting. Somebody sat there and watched a seahorse and estimated that it ate 3,000 little shrimps in a day. That sounds like very tedious counting work. I don't like counting, I don't like math, so I would not enjoy that task. But they are very efficient hunters and very able to eat a lot of food in a day, which is important for their very quick digestive system. So seahorses range in size from itty bitty, about ½ an inch, to about 14 inches tall, so just longer than a foot. There are, like I mentioned earlier, 46 or 47 species of seahorses. Some numbers that I saw were way off than that, but 46 and 47 is what I'm going with because those two sources are the most respected. So we'll go with that. So they range in size from like a peanut up to the size of a banana, if you want to think about good comparison sizes. With several of those species, about 12 of those species, only been officially discovered and documented by science in the last 10 years. That really shows that science is still learning a lot, especially in the ocean. And when you're looking at a little animal that can change color and lives in kind of a wide variety of places, that can kind of be a little challenging and confusing in helping figure out what you're looking at. Now, in these shallow waters that the seahorses live near the coast, they typically live in tropical or temperate waters. So that means very warm places, places like the Caribbean or Hawaii, near the equator, Southeast Asia, but also a few other places that are a little more temperate. So they live along the coast of California. They live along the coast of much of Asia, part of South America, part of Australia, and throughout most of Europe, and parts of Africa as well. So they can be found globally along the coast where it's warm. They need shallow water, they need it warm, and they need vegetation so they can kind of hide and find their food. Now, in their home range, they have some live in very small places, never leaving a very big space all their life. Some scientists have said that their home range is only about like this big. They don't leave a space bigger than that their entire life. They might move out when they're first born, but once they kind of get to a home range, they kind of stay in that spot and don't move very far from that. Some scientists have studied seahorses being fairly monogamous or pair bonded, to where a male and a female will only breed with each other. And they've documented very elaborate courtship displays where every morning the male and the female seahorse come together, they say hello to each other, and then they do a little dance with each other, changing colors as they touch each other. And then they're like, cool, see you tomorrow. And then they go off and go hunting. And then they meet up again the next morning. During that time, if it's their breeding season, they will take that opportunity to breed. And you may know some about seahorse reproduction, but I'll talk a little bit about it and try to explain it best I can. So the female seahorse lays her eggs inside a pouch on the male seahorse's belly. Then once they're in that pouch, he fertilizes them with his sperm. And then those eggs continue to grow and develop in a range from about 2 weeks up to about a month, some of the bigger species being a little bit longer. And then it is time for him to give birth. And when he does, his body kind of contracts and convulses. They call it contractions, just like human pregnancies. And the babies get pushed out of the pouch out into the ocean. On the little species, that may be as many as 50 babies. On some of the big species, it may be as many as 1,500 babies. So it's a lot of babies all at once. And they're just itty bitty too. They're tiny. You can barely see them. And once they're out of dad's pouch, that's it. He doesn't take care of them. Mom doesn't come back and take care of them. So they hatch, they're born, and then that's it for parental care. They're on their own. Because so many babies are born and because they're so little, very few survive into adulthood. They estimate that only about 1 in 1,000 survives to adulthood. That's because they're little, they live in the ocean. There's a lot of things that eat little things that live in the ocean. When we were talking about their home ranges, so once they're born, they may move a decent amount. And some of the way that they move is that they'll grab hold with their little tiny baby seahorse tail onto something else floating by. Sometimes that's a piece of seaweed, sometimes that's a stick or a branch that came in from the land side of things. Sometimes it's leaves or other debris. Sometimes it's trash, unfortunately. But they'll hang on to that and kind of go floating along with that for a while until they find a place that they think is a good home, and they'll let go of it, and then they'll go attach themselves to some grass and try to grow up and live there the rest of their life. Seahorses have a pretty short lifespan. Most species live less than 5 years. Some species only live about a year or 2. So they don't live very long. They are pretty small animals, and so they are pretty complex and pretty interesting, and that has caused a lot of people to be intrigued by them. Now, of the 46 or 47 species of seahorses, 2 are listed as endangered. I found some good information about the one. It is in Australia, and it is endangered because of increased human activity in and around the coastline, as it lives around some of the biggest cities in Australia, and in like Sydney Harbour, which is a very heavily used human area, and so its habitat is being threatened. 12 of the other species are listed as vulnerable, and 16 of the 46 species are listed as data deficient. What that means is we don't know. We don't know how many there are. We don't have a very good understanding of where they live and how they live, and we still have a lot of learning to do. The main threats that seahorses face are all human-caused. Sorry, there's a trash truck close by. I'll pause for a moment. All right, sorry about that. Threats for seahorses. The biggest threat that they face is collection by humans. People collect or harvest or take seahorses for 3 big reasons. 1, they are used in traditional medicines. That usually involves the seahorse being pulled out of the ocean, letting it die, letting it sit in the sun till it is dehydrated, and then crushing it up and using it in a tea, or crushing it up and putting it in food and calling that a medicine. That is very, very popular in many parts of the world, but that is a huge threat to seahorses. Similar to that, they are sometimes caught, pulled out of the water, let dry, and die. And then they are sold as little souvenirs in souvenir shops. I have seen them in souvenir shops when I was a kid and I visited in Texas, by the beach in Texas. They sold dried up seahorses that you could buy and take home and put on your shelf. I don't know if that still exists in the United States today. It might. And then the third reason that they're collected, and this is a little bit different, is they're captured live to be sold as pets. Now, when this happens, it's about 1 million seahorses caught live every year, and only about 1,000 of them live beyond 6 weeks. They are very difficult to take care of. They have very small mouths. They need very small food. They typically need a live food, so they're difficult to take care of. They also need a very complex environment. They don't necessarily do well with other fish. So sometimes people will buy them, stick them in their fish tank at home, And cool, it's beautiful, but it didn't live very long because people didn't have the right setup to actually take care of them. So that is a big part of the problem. With the seahorses that are caught and dried for the traditional medicine or for souvenirs, about 95% of them are of the dried seahorses are unregulated or illegal and unreported. So a lot of times nobody's monitoring how many of them are taken. It's estimated that there are over 60 million seahorses collected every year for that purpose. Some are caught in parts of the world and transported to other parts of the world, and that is beginning to be a bit more of a problem. The other big threat to seahorses is something related to the fishing industry, specifically with catching shrimp out in the ocean. A lot of times to catch shrimp, they'll put a big heavy piece of equipment down on the bottom of the ocean floor and a big net in between, like a big steel frame, and then they'll drag that along the ocean floor. That's called trawling. And with a trawler, for every 1 pound of shrimp that they catch 10 pounds of other sea creatures. And most of the time, those other animals are sometimes ground up and made into something called fish meal, which is sometimes used in like pet foods. Occasionally it's used in human foods. You may not even know what kind of things are in it. It's a generic term that could be like little crabs or snails or seahorses or other fish or shrimp or dead things or seaweed. It all gets put together and ground up into something called fish meal. So you might want to check if that's in any ingredients of anything you like to eat. Also with the shrimp and the trawling, sometimes that bycatch, that 10 pounds, is just tossed back into the ocean. Sometimes that survives. It's rare that it is, because once they drag it in the ocean in these big nets and then bring it up onto a boat, they have to sort it. And sometimes it sits for a while before it gets sorted. And like any fish, if it sits out of water for too long, it's going to die. The same is true with seahorses. There are some people that are doing some really amazing work. Our special shout out today is called Project Seahorse, and they are it was started by two scientists, one in Canada, one in the UK, who works at the Zoological Society of London. The two of them have teamed up and created this great organization that has three main goals: to save seahorses, to secure world's shallow seas and help protect them, and then to train future conservationists. They've really done an amazing work and have a huge network of people that they work with all around the world. They are currently monitoring populations of 10 different species of seahorse, which is pretty important because there's still a lot we don't know about a lot of seahorses. So Project Seahorse does some great work. I'll share more information about them on the Facebook page later today. As always, I also like to talk a little bit about my experiences with the animals I feature on Critter Chat. With seahorses, my experience has been pretty minor. I haven't really been involved too much other than at the aquarium when I worked there. We had several species of seahorse there. I think we had 4 or 5 different types that lived at the aquarium, from medium-sized ones to little ones, tropical ones, California species. And it was always fun to watch them, and I enjoyed when I had some free time going to those exhibits and talking to people about the seahorses and helping kids find them when they were camouflaged in their exhibits, which was fun. The video I shared earlier today is one of my favorite videos from my time at the aquarium of the seahorses eating. I was absolutely blown away at how quickly they could suck in those little shrimp. If you haven't watched that yet, it's on the Instagram or the Facebook page. Give that a little watch. It's short. It's only like 30 seconds, but it shows how incredible these little animals are at being great little hunters. I hope you've enjoyed what I've shared with you today about seahorses. I'll be sharing additional information on the Facebook profile throughout the day today, so check that out as well. As always, I upload the full video of these critter chats onto Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, and they also live permanently on my webpage at jeremythezoonerd.com, so you can check any of them out there if you've missed any episodes. And as always, feel free to like, share, follow, and subscribe to any of my content across the different platforms. I really appreciate it. I just hit 600 likes on the Facebook page, so thank you so much for following along on this Zoo Nerd journey of mine. I appreciate it, and take care, be happy, be healthy, have fun. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.